Is your area prepared for an emergency?
Do you know who to contact if you have an emergency?
Do you know the hazards in your area?
Do you know the resources in your area?
Emergencies can occur at any time and any place. They can affect a municipality on a local level, such as the Placentia flood of 2007. An incident such as a small forest fire can quickly develop into a regional emergency, affecting several municipalities. This scenario was evident in the area of Sheshatshiu, Labrador during the summer of 2002. The arrival of numerous planes and thousands of passengers as the result of the tragic events of 9/11 were indeed an emergency that impacted Newfoundland and Labrador at a provincial level. With fewer resources to draw on, smaller municipalities may be more at risk during an emergency than they realize. Smaller areas may have less experience in dealing with unexpected events that can quickly overwhelm their emergency response capability. The key reason for emergency management planning is to support public safety and create disaster-resilient communities. A realistic emergency management plan for your area, properly resourced and exercised, will save money and, most importantly, lives. Hi, I'm Erin Sully. On May 1st, 2009, the Emergency Measures Act was replaced with the new Emergency Services Act. The new legislation requires that every municipality, as defined in the Act, must complete an emergency management plan by May 1st, 2012. For the purposes of the Act, the term municipality means municipalities under the Municipalities Act. The cities of St. John's, Mount Pearl, Corner Brook, as well as Inuit communities and local service districts, commonly known as LSDs. Municipalities and LSDs may also adopt the plan of a neighboring community, as long as their neighbor agrees and they revise the plan to reflect their own circumstances. Revision of existing plans is crucial, as no plan can be adopted directly. It will require changes that are relevant to your area. Planning requirements will be flexible to recognize the many different sizes and circumstances of municipalities. The development of a plan will require time and effort. Keep in mind that your plan will positively assist your municipality should an emergency occur.
Fire and Emergency Services Newfoundland and Labrador have developed a 12-step program to assist your area in establishing a local emergency planning committee and to develop a basic emergency management plan. An emergency management plan will provide your area with the required information to effectively handle any emergency situation. It will also contain contact information and the location of resources that may be required.
In the following program, the word council means the council of a municipality, a regional council, an LSD committee, a regional emergency management committee, and an Inuit community council. These councils are responsible for ensuring that an emergency management plan is created for their respective areas. Once developed, the emergency management plan shall designate a person to act as an emergency coordinator to supervise and control the management of the plan. Any amendment of a plan shall be submitted to the Director of Emergency Services for approval before the amendments may be adopted by Council. For a council with an existing plan, any amendment or proposed changes must be submitted to the Director for approval before it may be adopted by Council. As you view this program, you'll meet representatives from several agencies. They'll describe the role their agency plays in an emergency. You should consider using these agencies as part of your emergency management plan. There'll be more on this a little later. So, where do you begin? Let's take a closer look at the 12 steps. The first step involves your council. Your council should authorize in writing the development of the emergency management plan, which will eventually be adopted by council. This authorization should be worded to enable the council to form an emergency planning committee, appoint an emergency management coordinator, and allocate financial resources to support an emergency.
The law now states that your area must develop an emergency management plan and you must abide by the new legislation. This may be a new experience for you and that it will present some challenges, but these can be overcome. You're not alone in this process. Fire and Emergency Services have information and resources to assist you and your team. Do not hesitate to contact us. Remember, you and your community are the ones who will benefit from this plan.
Now that you've committed your intent to develop a plan in writing, the next step is to establish an Emergency Council Committee. This committee will have two primary roles. They will be responsible for the overall development of the emergency management plan, and in the event of an emergency, they will be responsible for its implementation. Working with the emergency coordinator as appointed in Step 1, the Council Committee directs the emergency management program at a local level. This Council Committee should also make sure that the positions and the number of people on the Emergency Planning Committee is realistic to the size of the municipality or LSD.
When Council establishes an Emergency Council Committee, the main responsibility is to oversee the development of the emergency management plan and to implement it in the event of an emergency. The Council's role is to provide support and to assist the Emergency Management Planning Committee and the Emergency Management Coordinator.
Once Council authorizes the development of an emergency management plan, it must give someone the authority to begin developing it. That person will become the Emergency Management Coordinator. He or she is usually the town manager, town clerk, the chairperson of an LSD, or someone else that Council chooses. It will be that person's responsibility to identify the people who will make up the Emergency Planning Committee. You should note that if an emergency occurs, this person may still be responsible for the day-to-day operations of the community while managing the emergency.
In an emergency situation, the RCMP's role in any event is to take care of RCMP police matters in that jurisdiction and to ensure that the public and the community is safe.
As was just stated, the authorization referred to in Step 1 includes the appointment of an Emergency Management Coordinator. An Emergency Management Coordinator could be the town manager, the town clerk, the chair of an LSD, or someone designated by Council. This person should possess a sound knowledge of the community's resources, facilities, and agencies, and be familiar with the day-to-day administration and operations of Council. They must also advise Council of any changes or updates to the plan, coordinate all of the town's operations during an emergency, coordinate emergency planning and response, act on behalf of the mayor, council, or chair as instructed, and direct operations from an emergency operations center. There'll be more on this later. The committee under the leadership of the Emergency Management Coordinator is ultimately in charge of creating the Emergency Management Plan. The Emergency Management Planning Committee could be comprised of the following: Emergency Management Coordinator or Manager or Clerk, Municipal Services representatives from the Fire Department, Public Works, Public Information, or Engineering, representatives from regional health authorities, representatives from Departments of Human Resources, Labor and Employment, and Transportation and Works. Service agencies that could be called upon during an emergency to advise and assist the committee. The police, ground search and rescue, any other organization or group that Council wishes to include. Each agency representative on the Emergency Planning Committee is responsible for the development of their component of the plan.
The RCMP have their own emergency operations plans, and in an emergency situation or any other situation, we can assist the municipalities in the development of their emergency operations plans as well. We can meet with the municipalities. We will discuss operational procedures and plans. We can supply templates and assist in the development of their community plans.
Each agency's information should include key contact names, email addresses, and 24-hour contact numbers, which could include business, home, cell, pager, and/or fax numbers. Remember to include contact numbers for ham radio operators, the media, and identified alternate contacts. These are essential. Contact numbers for surrounding municipalities and LSDs should also be included in the event that their services or resources are required. Some of the best responses are those in which one community helps another. A current directory should be maintained. A person should be designated to update and verify all contact information every 6 months.
Contact lists are a vital component of any emergency management plan. They provide easy access to all responders and resources. It is essential that you complete a detailed contact list and keep it updated on a regular basis. Don't be caught short when you have an emergency.
Under the Act, 2 or more municipalities may join together to form a regional emergency management committee for the purpose of developing a regional plan. A regional plan shall be approved by the director before a council adopts it. The requirements of the Act apply as if the plan had been made by council alone.
The geographical area of Port au Port is large. As the larger centre, Stephenville understood that it had more resources than the outlying communities. The Stephenville Council also understood that in the event of an emergency, it may be required to share these resources. When we were developing our emergency management plan, we encouraged neighboring communities to participate in the planning process. This resulted in a regional emergency management plan that has benefited the entire area.
Council does value the opportunity to work with other communities in a spirit of cooperation and partnership. For this reason, they were very eager to play a role in the development of an emergency management plan. Council immediately said yes when approached by the town of Stephenville to participate in an emergency management plan for Bay St. George. Considering the size of our municipality, this sharing of resources and responsibilities will enable our town to more efficiently and effectively respond to an emergency.
Here on Fogo Island, we have a number of small municipalities in close proximity to each other. We share the same critical infrastructure, such as the hospital, the school, and the arena. We decided that we would work together to develop one emergency management plan. One benefit of doing this was that we would eliminate the possibility of duplicating expectations of an outside agency.
When developing your emergency plan, it is critical that your fire department be a key player. They are familiar with the town's infrastructure, and as emergency responders, fire department members can help identify hazards in your area. Their training has prepared them to perform in stressful situations.
You should now have an emergency planning committee in place and be beginning to develop the framework of your emergency management plan. Your emergency management plan will become one in a chain of similar plans produced at a local, regional, provincial, and federal level. At this point, you should consult with Fire and Emergency Services and obtain their advice.
You are encouraged to contact the emergency planning officer in your area for any assistance you may need in developing your plan. We have developed a variety of tools and templates that can assist you. Our knowledge base and experience from past events may be an asset to you as you consider the hazards in your own area. It is critical to develop a plan to prepare for, respond to, and recover from an event. Feel free to contact us for any questions you may have during your plan development.
Fire and Emergency Services can explain how your council fits into the overall picture and what additional resources may be available. Their staff will assist you in developing your plan. However, they cannot complete the plan for you.
Fire and Emergency Services will work closely with your emergency planning coordinator to ensure that all aspects of emergency planning are addressed. This interaction is critical. We can provide free of charge guidance, information, and training that can be a valuable assistance to you.
You are the best judge of what should be included in your emergency management plan. You and others living in your community are acquainted with the area's facilities and resources, as well as local geography, industry, and hazards that may exist. If you're unsure of what should be included, please contact Fire and Emergency Services.
Well, when developing a plan for your area, I think the first thing that you should do is rely on the resources that are out there. When I say that, I mean people who have the knowledge. Develop your plan when trying to find experiences from other communities, and then have your plan put into place. Don't try to do it alone and try to figure it out. Use the knowledge and the resources that are there.
Public Safety Canada is responsible for keeping Canadians safe, and we do that in collaboration with our federal and provincial partners to prepare for responding to emergencies in support of the province and municipalities affected by disasters. Public Safety Canada is prepared to provide federal support to the province and municipalities in times of emergencies. So don't forget to include Public Safety Canada in your emergency planning process.
At this time, you should now begin to look at your area's hazards, risks, and vulnerabilities. Local knowledge, research, and imagination are required to determine all man-made and natural hazards that could potentially affect your area. This is a crucial step. Several factors should be considered when compiling your comprehensive list of potential hazards. These include the following. Demography. Areas with larger populations are vulnerable to emergencies, even though they may possess more resources for handling disasters. Consider if your area has persons with disabilities or other individuals who may require special assistance during emergencies. Industry. Research local industries to discover if any produce or store chemicals. Examples are fish plants, arenas, or oil storage tanks. A detailed list can be found in the accompanying manual. Transportation. Are dangerous chemicals being shipped by water or road through or near your area? Are you able to handle a serious bus accident? Consider how your area would cope if all transportation were cut off. Geography. Is your town located on a floodplain, in an area prone to landslides or storm surges?
Newfoundland and Labrador has a long history of geological disasters, and the potential for these kinds of events need to be considered when you're developing an emergency management plan for your area. The types of incidents that we're concerned with are things like landslides, such as the recent events at Daniels Harbour and Trout River. Avalanches have occurred throughout the province, including the battery here behind me. Rockfalls are other common events, such as the one at Upper Island Cove in late 1999. All of these kinds of events need to be considered when you're developing an emergency management plan.
You should make a list of possible hazards in order of their likelihood of occurrence. The Diamond ranking system is a good way of assessing hazards in your area. Using 9 hazards, rank them according to which could have the greatest impact and which could have the least. The top of the diamond represents the hazard that requires the highest planning priority. The bottom of the diamond represents the hazard that requires the lowest planning priority. Items appearing side by side have equal planning priority. If you cannot identify 9 hazards, identify as many as you can. Imagine the worst case scenario for each and analyze its possible effects upon your area. All things are possible. Be imaginative and extend your list.
When compiling your list of hazards, remember to include increased rainfall. The province has seen numerous flood events in recent years caused by this. When making your list, be creative.
Potential hazards could include spill of a dangerous substance, urban and wildfire, flood, landslide, health emergency, power failure, transportation disaster, and windstorm. A detailed list can be found in the accompanying manual.
Well, the role of the Ground Search and Rescue is to have people to respond for lost and missing people as their main responsibility. In a bigger emergency, they can also assist in disaster planning and helping out in disasters itself as to mitigation, taking care of crowd control, evacuation, whatever. But most of it is through lost and missing persons. And if you can, always make sure that you have Newfoundland and Labrador Search and Rescue Association in your emergency plan.
Now that the hazards, risks, and vulnerabilities have been determined in your area, the Emergency Planning Committee must create a list of actions required to combat each emergency situation. Most actions fall under one or another agency, such as fire, police, engineering, and others.
We have recognized several hazards in our area. As a part of our emergency management plan, we have identified alternate sources of transportation should the roads to our area become cut off. We have established mutual aid agreements with the refinery and the transshipment terminal. We are also familiar with each other's emergency plans. We know that we can count on each other and share our resources should an emergency occur.
Harbour Grace has a mutual aid agreement with many communities in this area. We find it very beneficial to call upon other agencies to know the resources that they have at any given time. Our mutual aid agreement gives us an opportunity to use other resources in the area and also personnel. At times when we get called out, we may be short of staff, we may need more firefighters. We may need equipment that we don't have at any particular fire department. Therefore, we find it great to be able to call upon other fire departments in the area to assist in any way. I personally have contact numbers of resources in the area, ambulance services, heavy equipment operators, construction workers, whoever. It's not just fire departments, it's other agencies in the area that may be called upon at any given time. You may not need them every call that you go out on, but there will be a time where you need those other agencies.
Now that the tasks and actions have been determined, the committee should now begin to evaluate the resources that are available to them. The Emergency Planning Committee should discuss the following questions. Is your area able to respond to more than one emergency situation at a time? Where could you obtain additional people and resources if needed? Is your area's medical support system able to handle an emergency? Does your area have an efficient communication and transportation system? Do you have an emergency operations center? If the primary emergency operations center is unavailable, do you have an alternate site? Earlier in Step 3, we mentioned about directing operations from an emergency operations center. An emergency operations center is an area in which all participants can come together during an emergency and work as a team and share information with those in the field. Let's take a closer look at an EOC. An EOC is a physical facility in which key players come together to manage the disaster. It can be located in the town hall, a community center, at a community services organization, or any other place that can accommodate all participants. Your municipality should have a designated EOC. It is crucial that the area be large enough to accommodate seating and ensure workstations are available for all participants who are managing the emergency. Ideally, the EOC should have pre-wired phone hookups and sufficient telephones. Most importantly, a common area is established to bring all agencies together. An identity pass must be issued to everyone entering the EOC, and identification cards for each stakeholder must be displayed. Logbooks, stationery, pens, and other supplies must be present. Maps and other support material should be readily available. Bathroom facilities must be conveniently located. A rest area must be prepared. Food supplies must be arranged. Fully operational communication and media monitoring equipment must be set up in a separate nearby area and a media work area established. Where possible, the EOC should also have a backup power supply that should be checked on a regular basis. In addition, backup communications such as amateur radio or ham operators must be identified.
During an emergency event, it's possible that all regular lines of communications may be cut off. This is where ham radio operators can play a crucial role. We have a strong radio communications network throughout the province. We are able to provide solid communications in any emergency situation.
The EOC is a central location where information is collected, evaluated, and displayed. Here, operations for the disaster are coordinated and decisions are made. An EOC location should be designated as part of your emergency management plan.
During a recent emergency, we did not have an EOC identified. We quickly learned that a designated area for key players to get together for situation updates and to make decisions were desperately needed. Given the limited locations we had to choose from, we decided that the meeting room at the council office would serve as our EOC. We have now also identified a second possible location should we ever need it. More importantly, we found a place where people were able to work together in an emergency situation. Working together during an emergency is what's important.
When an emergency is declared, decide how and by whom the public and minister are notified. During an emergency, if your resources are not adequate, you may need assistance from neighboring municipalities, as well as private and government agencies which also have resources.
Often during an emergency, your town's resources may become overwhelmed and you may not have enough resources to handle the job. It is critical that you contact local businesses and industries to see what equipment they may have and how they may help you and share resources.
Local business, municipal, provincial, and/or federal government resources may be required to adequately respond to any given emergency. In addition to this, however, you must also determine what resources are required to continue day-to-day operations, remembering that not all areas of your municipality may be impacted by the situation.
When compiling your list of resources, think outside the box. Include items such as generators, excavators, chainsaws, boats, blankets and cots, and sources of food and water.
As part of your emergency management plan, make sure the media is included. They can be a real asset because we're able to get critical information out to the public quickly and efficiently. Updated reports can identify the potentially dangerous situations and perhaps prevent further harm. We can get out those road closures or detours and help the authorities in the traffic diversion or management. So as part of your due diligence, make sure you have the most up-to-date contact numbers in your emergency management plan.
By now, your plan should be coming together. The Emergency Planning Committee can now begin writing the Emergency Management Plan based on the research and information obtained. As stated earlier, members or partner agencies will be responsible for developing their individual component of your plan.
When writing your emergency plan, it is very important to have the fire department as well as other emergency responders included in the planning process. Oftentimes, members of the fire department have pre-established working relationships with other emergency responders in your area. Fire departments prepare for and respond to various events on a day-to-day basis. Oftentimes, they already have plans of their own in place, which can be incorporated into the municipality's plan.
Well, it's very important to know the role of other agencies because during emergency situations, you need to know where to find those resources quickly. Just recently at a major fire here in this community, we had to draw on other fire departments, the Salvation Army, the police forces, even ground search and rescue. The only way we knew that is that we had already practiced our plan and had planning already in place.
The basic plan provides the concept of operations and outlines a list of guidelines for implementation, direction, and control. It lists responsibilities, names, addresses, and contact information. The Emergency Management Coordinator begins to write the Emergency Management Plan, which includes the response plans for individual agencies. The Emergency Management Plan must outline immediate action and responsibilities of each agency or department, list available personnel and other resources, and how they would be activated during an emergency situation, state the duties of all personnel involved, outline your contact list, which must be updated every 6 months.
When completing your municipal emergency plan, it is important to include other key stakeholders. When including health officials and personnel in your plan, be sure to discuss with them the services they may or may not be able to offer in your area. During an emergency, each agency impacted will operate an independent EOC to carry out their specific responses. However, identifying who will be representing each agency at the municipal EOC during the emergency is crucial. Becoming familiar with other agencies and understanding they also have an emergency plan is key to a successful response. it is critical that the municipality understand the roles and responsibilities of each agency named in the plan or are called in to assist in the response.
As the plan continues to develop, the Emergency Management Coordinator consolidates all the information that's been obtained and creates a working draft of the Emergency Management Plan. Included in the plan should be a complete list of roles and responsibilities of those named in the plan, resources, updated telephone fan-out lists, evacuation plans, mutual aid agreements with other areas, and individual agency plans.
With the Red Cross, we look at our National Disaster Assistance Guidelines to assist those affected by a disaster. Specifically, we'd work with the municipality to find out the needs of their community. It could be anything from working and setting up a reception centre or shelter to assisting with financial needs. We work closely with our partners with Fire and Emergency Services or Human Resources, Labour and Employment to assess those needs. We work in conjunction with, not in competition with them, to provide that. We have volunteers trained throughout the country that can assist with that. We're heavily trained to work in what's called family reunification. So in a disaster, we would actually register people affected. So if family members see it on the news that their loved ones are affected by a flood, or say, they can contact our 1-800 number in order to find their loved one. And if their loved one has registered with us and has given us permission to give out their information, we can connect them back together. So from our response, the quicker we're called in by a municipality, the better it is for us to be able to respond. So having us listed in their emergency response plan is very important for the speed at which we can respond to a disaster.
Councils are strongly encouraged to work with Fire and Emergency Services, regional emergency management and planning officers to ensure that your plan is in proper order prior to being submitted to Council for approval. Once your plan is drafted, it should then be submitted to them for review. And as it's being reviewed, they may make recommendations and provide suggestions on ways to further enhance your plan. Remember, once the Emergency Planning Committee submits the plan and it's reviewed by Council, revisions may still be suggested. If changes are required, Council will direct the Emergency Planning Committee to make the necessary changes. Once revised, the plan is then presented back to Council for sign-off.
The key point here is that the Emergency Planning Committee and the Council, with the assistance of Fire and Emergency Services, should be working together to develop an effective emergency management plan.
Recently, when we had our major water break, we were able to implement our plan, and it gave us the abilities to have some sort of calmness. It gave us the direction on where we should go, who we should deal with, the resources that we have that are into our plan, and we're able to give certainly the confidence to be able to implement the plan and be able to notify people and be able to do it in a calm and efficient manner.
When the Planning Committee has completed the plan and Council has signed off, it is then forwarded to Fire and Emergency Services for approval by the Director. Once approved, the Director will return the plan to Council for formal adoption. An emergency management plan cannot be implemented until it receives the Director's approval and has been adopted by Council.
I found working with Fire and Emergency Services an excellent experience. Their training courses were an invaluable source of information that greatly assisted us in the development of our emergency management plan. I would highly recommend you attend any of their training courses.
When developing your emergency management plan, ensure that your expectations do not exceed your abilities.
When the plan is approved and adopted, the public should be advised that their area now has an emergency management plan. Stakeholders must have a working knowledge of roles and responsibilities of other agencies.
When developing your emergency management plan, it is important to include all emergency responders in the planning process.
In an emergency situation, it is crucial that we know all of our roles and responsibilities for all our partners.
It is important to know the roles of others because at a scene it can be very stressful. You know that RCMP are on scene, you know their role. You should know their role. You ambulance on scene, you should know their role. Fire departments, everybody has a job to do, and you know, with mutual aid working together, it makes all emergency scenes work easier.
The Salvation Army mobilizes its various congregations throughout the province to provide services to the victims and responders in disaster situations. We provide food, hydration, and clothing, as well as services such as meet and greet and emotional and spiritual care. We also have highly trained teams capable of providing critical incident stress management, commonly referred to as emotional and psychological first aid, to people experiencing stress as a result of a disaster. Remember to include the Salvation Army as part of your emergency management plan.
Having a written plan is not enough. An emergency management plan is only as good as the area's ability to carry it out. The plan, to be effective, must be tested and exercised.
It's very important to exercise your plan. Tabletop exercise can be a valuable resource when testing your plan. Bring your responding agencies together, design an imaginary emergency, and slowly talk your way through the event, discussing how best to handle it and how resources can best be deployed. Tabletop exercises will afford you the opportunity to become familiar with how the various agencies will interact during an emergency. Later, as you become familiar with your plan, you may move up to a live exercise. Most importantly, start small.
Substantial work is needed to properly test an emergency management plan. Tabletop and live exercises put the plan into action in full detail. Undertaking exercises using all community services and facilities help to assess every part of the emergency management plan and how the various agencies communicate and work together. Exercises will pinpoint areas requiring revision and improvement. Planning today may help save lives, property, and the environment in the future. Your efforts will be repaid many times over should your community ever have to face the real thing. Further education and training may be required for people to feel competent and comfortable with their roles in the plan. Fire and emergency services can help you with this. They offer training programs in effective emergency management. They can be contacted for a course schedule.
Fire and Emergency Service offers training programs: the Basic Emergency Management course, Incident Command, EOC, and Exercise Design. If a member of your municipality or any of your first responders are interested in doing these courses, please contact Fire and Emergency Services.
The Department of Human Resources, Labour and Employment is responsible for the delivery of emergency social services during times of crisis or disaster. These services include the establishment of a reception centre from which registration and inquiry, food services, lodging, clothing services, and personal services may be delivered. The department has a memorandum of understanding with both the Salvation Army and the Red Cross to assist in the delivery of these services. Remember to include Human Resources, Labour and Employment in your emergency management plan.
To develop your emergency management plan, follow the guidelines that have been presented in this program, as well as the accompanying manual. Your plan will help ensure that your area is prepared when an emergency does occur. Yes, emergencies can happen at any place and at any time. They are very real and may occur when least expected. Whatever the cause, emergencies are a threat to our property, our safety, and most importantly, our lives. You must be prepared to combat threats to public safety wherever and whenever they occur.